Emmanuel, Curtis, we're in Paris. It's a bit cold at the moment, but the summer is creeping upon us, and it is a Paralympic Olympic year. So the hype for all of these sports grows and grows and grows, as it does every 4 years. I wonder if you guys could give me, before we kick off, a bit of a backstory. How did you find yourself in this space competing at the levels you do?
Yeah, so I was injured in 2012 in Afghanistan, where I stepped on an improvised explosive device or a homemade landmine, and was through my recovery, my rehabilitation, I was looking for something to do that was quite familiar and that I enjoyed, and sport was it, and tried a heap of different things and ended up in paracanoe. So I do a 200-metre straight line sprint kayak and a canoe, and I picked up the paddle in 2014 and had pretty quick success, and managed to win in 2016, and have been doing it ever since. And it's an amazing opportunity, and just to be in this position and looking down the barrel of Paris just a few months away, I'm excited.
Nice.
Yeah, so for me, I've always had a big passion for sport. Sport was almost like my sort of getaway mechanism. So, if anything was going wrong at home, or, I was a little bit shy at school, but sport was that zone that I could sort of just be myself and forget about, all like the external things. So I kind of really enjoyed sort of just playing around from an early age. And I remember actually starting to learn how to swim. I'd never been taught swimming, but I moved to a new school and, their PE lesson was swimming. So I started off doing swimming for a few weeks. I couldn't probably move more than 3 meters in the water at one time. So it was a little bit difficult at the start, but once I got the hang of it and, I was speaking to the instructors all the time, just asking them for tips and stuff like that and how I can adapt in my situation. I slowly began to learn how to swim. Swam for my borough in 2012 and 2013 at the London Youth Games. And across the 2 years, got 2 gold medals, 2 silvers and 1 bronze. So I was really proud of that achievement. Went into secondary school and amongst all my friends in secondary school, swimming wasn't really one of the favourable sports. So, everyone was quite fussed about football. I mean, I liked football anyway, so I didn't have a problem with playing football, and especially because I was relatively fast anyways. I used to just play football. They used to stick me on the wing, go long, and I'd chase it, and I'd pretty much win it 9 times out of 10. So, that's what I used to do, and I ended up moving secondary schools again. So I moved from London and I moved to Essex, and it was in that school in Essex, which, funny enough, wasn't as competitive in sports as my previous school. So I think that kind of allowed me to shine a little bit amongst the other students. So we had a districts competition where my school faces all the other schools in the county, and finished second in the sprints events. And I think a lot of people understand that finishing second in a sprint event is not easy at all, especially when all the other kids were able-bodied. So I think my teacher saw that, and he was volunteering at the time, and was really encouraging in terms of getting me a club, finding me a good coach, and just monitoring me, and just speaking to me on sort of a daily basis on not even just to do with the sport, but asking about how my education is going, or if there was any problems that I was facing. Sometimes she'd actually get me out of detention and say that I'd do revision with her, which was honestly, she was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it's just having that someone there, knowing that that person cares about you is really important, and I think a lot of people undervalue that. So a few years down the line, I was training really hard, and I actually got an opportunity to compete at the London Diamond League in 2019. So I think I was 17 years old at the time, and being 17 and seeing the likes of Andre de Grasse, Michael Johnson, I think Adam Jamili, all these top guys in the world was in my hotel, and I was seeing these guys. I'm thinking, wait, I'm only 17 and I'm with these guys. So it's a surreal kind of feeling, and I kind of looked at myself in that moment, and I even PB'd at the competition. So I looked at myself and I said, I can really achieve something big in the sport. So a few years down the line, got myself on the world-class program team for the Great Britain, and now I'm competing at international level.
Nice,
Awesome.
Nice. We're obviously here you're here in Paris for the BUPA Picture of Health campaign at the moment. Previous to Afghanistan, what did health mean to you then?
So I was in the army, so it was very, very team-orientated organisation. Whenever we did something, it was generally a physical task, and I always saw it, health, as, especially in the military, as my responsibility. Yeah, we do a lot of group PT and group sort of training, but to be better, or to maybe be a strong part of that team, I always saw myself as someone who could do more and help more, and didn't want to be a liability. I think that's probably the reason why I sort of pushed myself in that space. So we'd do the PT in the morning with everyone, and then in the afternoons I'd do my own stuff on top of. So I got incredibly fit. And then when we were in Afghanistan, I was still really fit, even more so because we were working at like 3,000 or 4,000 meters above sea level. So she was really high and pretty hard work and hot, hard conditions, but always with that mindset of being around, being able to be relied upon in a physical situation to help where I could, not to like, what's the word, like to diminish other people's aspects in the squad or the team or whatever you want to call it. It was more about being relied upon to be there.
You're controlling what you can control.
That's right. Yeah.
Did Afghanistan change your perspective at all on how you think about maybe not so much fitness but health in general?
A little bit. I guess relying on maybe not Afghanistan, but the military sort of mindset or military structure when we're away. So when we have a good balance of home life and work life and our personal life, and once all that's together, you can be really healthy and you can commit yourself to certain different things in a more committed way, more focused way, more specific way. So having that realization that if you can get everything sorted in your home life and in your personal life and balance all that out, you can really do work, whatever that may be, really well and get the best out of that time and the energy that you're committing.
And post your injuries, did that change at all how you sort of reflected on your sporting pursuit and sort of pursuing fitness and pushing yourself? How did that affect how you sort of thought about those things?
Yeah, for me, before my injury, I was not goal orientated. Yeah, we obviously had missions and tasks and things like that, but I was 24 years old when I got hurt, so everything before that, I wasn't too worried about it, and it would happen eventually or not, and that was it. But once I got hurt, I very much realized that I could sit in the corner and wait for the world to feel sorry for me, but in a matter of fact, it's up to me to stand up and go and to get out and rehab and get strong and get my legs and start walking again and finding something that would give me purpose. And it was in hospital that I realized that I'm going to need goals to get out of here, to make this count, but to get the best out of this situation. And I've always seen as make the most of what you got, and that's generally the military way. You're not given much to achieve a massive task. So having that happen, you then realize that it's up to you. You really need to nail down, and goals are great, motivation's good, but discipline's even better. And discipline is what gets you the goals and gets you the gold. And if you're able to be disciplined all the way through it, like as I said, motivation, sometimes you don't want to do the training at 5 a.m, it's raining, it's cold and all that sort of crap. You don't want to do it, but discipline makes you do it, and that's what makes you achieve.
Do you feel like having the sporting pursuit to aim towards after your injuries, did that have a knock-on effect to the rest of your life in terms of having that drive and that purpose?
Maybe not the goal-orientated stuff, because like being here, there's this amazing opportunity come out of sort of not nowhere, but through my work from elsewhere. So therefore, if I commit myself to my primary purpose, I will benefit elsewhere, and this is what's happening. And I've got amazing opportunities. We've got the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Paralympic Games coming. It's an hour down the road from my home city, and there's amazing opportunities there, and there's some employment opportunities and sponsor opportunities. There's all these things speaking, and it's really opened a whole new avenue of possibilities through sport. And I really believe that sport can play a bigger role in rehabilitation and recovery from an injury and a health perspective that is being probably not as utilised as much as it could be. You know, we're quick to hand out, you know, go see this specialist, go have this medication will make you feel better. Go outside, have a run, get some, you know, like you said, using sport to really spend and enjoy yourself and get outside and live a healthy and active life. And I think you'll see some flow-on effects from that as well.
If you're enjoying this content, you can watch or listen ad-free on the Men's Health app by joining the Men's Health Squad today. Head over to hearstmagazines.co.uk/mh-mag. Once you're in the squad, you'll also have access to tons of exclusive content, including interviews, ad-free videos, and our world-class training platform, which features dozens of training plans to suit every level and any goal.
Emmanuel, you were obviously competing from a young age, and I don't think I should have said this, but clearly, as you were talking us through your sort of like sporting bio there, for a huge portion of that, you're not talking about parasport. You were, when you were young, you were just, it was just sport, right? You were competing against everybody else at school. Do you think that, or what are your thoughts on how, in a similar sort of way, having those sporting pursuits and those aims and enjoying that and being out there and training, etc. Do you think that had a sort of clearly did, but what are your thoughts on the sort of positive effect that had on your life?
So for me, I would say just the fact that I wanted to be competitive, and sort of I wasn't really necessarily afraid to lose or afraid to fail. So I always just wanted to play. I always just wanted to have fun, and I think that's what the main thing about sport is. It just gives you that sort of time to switch off and just actually be sociable a little bit, because nowadays with all the social media and everyone going online and stuff, I think we're kind of losing that bit of that. We're getting a bit more distant to our friends and our peers and our family, but sport just allows you to have that unity and to actually make friends. Because when I was younger, I didn't necessarily have that many friends, because I always used to think that the kids would look at me different, so I was a bit shy. And likewise with the kids, I feel like sometimes they actually would look at me different because of how I was born. But when I started playing sport and actually started to be good at sport, and they started to make friends with me, and it was just one of those ones where sport actually allowed us to click in a way where we wouldn't necessarily click in like a workplace or a school. And it's just that that ability to just, have that freedom of, you don't have to worry about anything else, anything externally, any lessons or, whatever work you've got, or, whatever, everyone has problems that are going on at home maybe every week or every other week or something like that. So it just allows you to switch off and really be you and express yourself.
Do you think that's especially kind of important for young children with disability and things like that, being in those environments where those barriers break down and you're all doing the same thing, and as you say, that sort of self-consciousness that you experience dissolves away? Do you think that if you hadn't had that, do you think your life could have been different?
Oh, 100%. I think I only God knows where I'd be today if I didn't have sport. Like, sport was literally, I would say, my savior. And I would say not just for people with disability, but I'd say people without disability as well. Because, sometimes I feel like people tend to get a bit lonely inside and no one really wants to speak up. Everyone's sometimes a little bit shy to say, oh, I'm worried about X, Y, Z. And, anytime when you're just participating in sport or just playing any games or something like that, where, it involves some sort of communication or some sort of teamwork, it just it makes you become closer to a person, no matter what person it is. Even if you don't like the person, I've actually found out that a lot of I would say enemies, but they're not really enemies. But in school we had those people that we didn't like. I ended up making friends with them through sport and through being on the same team. Even though I didn't necessarily want to be on the same team, I had that sort of feeling of I didn't want to lose. So the fact that I knew I didn't want to lose, they kind of had a similar thing of they didn't want to lose. So we were forced to work together. And just that ability to actually, you have a particular mindset, that other person also has a particular mindset. Even though you don't like each other, you come together to actually, reach a certain goal, or even if it's just, just to win.
Yeah, definitely breaks down barriers, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
In your decade now in parasports. What changes have you seen?
I would say it's probably more from what I saw at the beginning. It's just a snowball effect of exposure, but also probably the biggest change is probably in the commercial space of parasport. I've had a few sponsors that were sponsoring out the Australian Olympic team, and now they're exclusively looking at the Paralympic team. And I think it's because the values and actions of our Paralympic athletes, not just in Australia, but globally, our movement is more relatable. There's more obvious challenges. There's more difficulties in achieving. And then when you see what is possible, like what Emmanuel's saying, the perception of person with disability is like, oh, they can't. And then all of a sudden, the Paralympic Games gets shown, and all of a sudden, they can see that we can. And what we can do is far greater than what they perceive we could. Yeah. And I think the Paralympic Games has this ability to shine a light on what is possible, not just for a person with disability, but in their own lives, whether they have 2 arms and 2 legs or not, or in a wheelchair or not. Like there's many different ways to get things done, and it's just a matter of seeing it, and then when you can believe it, and then you can do it.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's I think with Olympians, the word Olympian, there's this weird kind of disconnect, right? These are the people out there. It's aspirational, but it's held at arm's length. Whereas with the Paralympics and with parasports, as you say, I think people can see.
Yeah, and I would add to that is that any person that's walking around thinking they don't have a disability, they could immediately become a disabled person. It's an exclusive club that anyone can become a part of. And, in my opinion, I acquired my disability, not of a choice of my own, but it is a really difficult identity process. But if we can show that there's more potential in a person with a disability, we can then, I think, open up opportunities for people with disability all over the world, and developed nations can have more opportunity, more access, more resources, more equipment. It's just creating an environment where anyone can achieve, and I think the Paralympic Games does that in a really good way.
Yeah, 100%. How about you, Emmanuel? In your time competing, have you seen any changes in parasports?
Yeah, I would actually agree a bit with Curtis, because I think sort of when I remember watching parasports and Paralympics back in 2012, I remember 2 athletes specifically, which was Richard Whitehead and Johnny Peacock. And back in the day, before that, I didn't actually know that parasport actually existed. So just being able to actually see them on TV performing in one of the best stadiums in the world, just gave me that bit of that sense of urgency that, I want to be able to achieve this thing as well. And I look at myself and I look at them, and I understand that they've definitely gone through challenges, and they've also overcome some challenges, and likewise with myself. So I think the thing about the Paralympics is it showcases the different challenges that everyone has to go through, because we've got loads of different classifications. We've got the visually impaired, we've got the leg amputees, we've got cerebral palsy, we've got the arm amputees, we've got wheelchair people. So it just shows a range of different ways that people have overcome certain challenges, and stuff, and you actually get to have a feel of how they've adapted to life. And I think a lot of people will, maybe there might be a situation where something's happened and, they're feeling a bit low, or there's a real, big challenge that they've had to overcome, and they're thinking, it's almost impossible. And, just watching the Paralympics, and you think, what have these guys, had to have gone through to get to this stage? And then, you start to wonder, and you start to question, and you start to think, the realms of possibilities, there's so many things that can actually be achieved when you're focused and when you put your mind to it. And I think a lot of the time that, because the Paralympics is separate to the Olympics, I feel like people don't necessarily appreciate the Paralympics as much. So one thing that I realized is when I was competing at the Commonwealth Games, that was inclusive of the Paralympic athletes and the Olympic athletes, and like just being able to actually like speak to them and just hear everyone's experience, because everyone's got a different journey. Everyone's had different challenges that they've had to face, whether you're an able-bodied athlete or whether you're a Paralympic athlete, if you understand what I mean. So I think just being able to actually link those two together, it has a really powerful effect.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting. That's something I'd like to get both your takes on. Do you think that there's some utility, or is it, clearly you do, in having less separation and perhaps having more integration of those? Obviously there's logistical stuff to be solved there, but do you personally think that would create great surface area for young people, anybody with disability to see what's available? But just in general, do you think it would be of use to have more integration of the two?
Yeah, to a very, very good extent, actually. I think just to have the showcase of, like Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes, and, having them actually on the same team. So, maybe there's like, a competition or something where like, they have to have like certain number of, wheelchair users, or maybe amputee athletes, and then they'll have like a few athletes from other disciplines, like maybe jumping or that kind of stuff. So and seeing them actually having to work together to get to a common goal would be like really, really entertaining, really interesting, and I think it would make good for the viewers at home watching, and the people that actually want to get into the sport, because I'm sure there's lots of people that want to get into the sport that they think, or maybe they might not fit in, or they might not be successful, but watching something like that would really, I think, encourage people to want to achieve something.
What about you, Curtis? Do you think there's a degree of separation that maybe doesn't need to be there, or?
Yeah, you pointed it out before. You said logistical issues, but I reckon that's already solved. We've already got two different games, or two different times where you could put all the swimming together and all that at the start, and then do the athletics later on, like we do at the Paralympics. So we just swap and blend it all together as if it's one games, but just split it down the middle in terms of dates rather than sport or disability. So rather than disability.
Right.
But I think my sport, when we do World Champs on a year-to-year basis, we're all together. We're integrated into their programs. We're integrated in their broadcasting timings. We're integrated into their podium ceremonies. Like, we're quite an inclusive sport, and I'm very lucky because I know that some sports are not like that. But that it sort of highlights barriers and issues that might be there that don't need to be. When you start separating things, you're sort of like us and them and that sort of thing. And then commercial opportunities might be better in this zone, so they start focusing in this zone. And I spoke about it before, but with sports, particularly different sports, you can see certain people or certain athlete types might get more. It's just the same as the women in sport type thing. In the gender equality thing, it's a similar example. It's not the same thing, but it's an example that we've seen huge gains in women's sport, inclusive sport, with football. In Australia, we've got women's AFL, Australian football, NRL, rugby. Women's sport is growing, and you can see that the balance and the interest in it is growing. And you just put it in front, put it out there, or build it, and they'll come. Is what the saying I'm trying to say. So if you allow this opportunity to have an equal sort of event with everyone integrated. Like, we sort of do it in Paralympic sport already with wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby. We have a point system because there's varying degrees of disability. It's a spectrum. And then if you have on the field a certain amount of points, that's when you're allowed to have your team. But if you go over that points with, say, a more less disabled person, you're in breach of that rule. So you can make it work. And I think there's certain opportunities where, or sports that may not have that chance, but if you thought about it, sat down, had a really good think, we spend bucket loads of monies on new stadiums and things like that. I'm sure if we just sat down and used a few bob to figure it out.
Yeah. Or even if those things were considered during that process. I think you touched on something really interesting there, in that actually just having a sort of concurrent, even if it's just a broadcasting schedule of parasport. And let's take the Olympics and the Paralympics for example. Like you say, having the sports run concurrently in the same way that now we go men's and women's, and rather than sort of having that separation, I think it straight away it gets bums in seats, right? And you've got all these other eyes that might not historically have switched on for the Paralympics or whatever it was, but that raises the eyes on for people who are commercial minded and stuff like that, which is only going to be great for the athletes, right?
Of course, yeah. And if you put it there, people who may not watch it as well will still see it. So it's just a matter of placing it in an area or a zone or time or schedule where it's can potentially be seen by someone who may be unsuspecting. So I think it's a great opportunity commercially, but also for humanity to change perceptions, to show what's possible, to get little Jimmy to see that he's not the only person in a wheelchair or missing an arm or a leg, or it's all about making the world better through sport, and that's what the Olympic and Paralympic Games encompasses. That's its a whole point. So it's not just going out there and being the best. It's actually changing the world, and I think it's a very big sort of statement to say and a big sort of view, but if you break it all down into what is actually happening, it's all positive. It's all positive. So if you just have that opportunity, it'll happen.
Yeah, and arguably even more important from that sort of global standpoint for parasports.
Yeah,
To
in Australia, 20% of Australians live with a disability, and more, I think it's like 89% want to do sport. So if we show that it's possible, and they might not have seen it before, we can then provide and get resources, and then we can have an understanding that, man, we've got all these people out there that want to do things. We can build things for it, and it's just one of those another hurdle, another barrier, another challenge that is out there for people living with disability.
Yeah, it would end up becoming almost like the tide that raises all ships.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this content, you can watch or listen ad-free on the Men's Health app by joining the Men's Health Squad today. Head over to hearstmagazines.co.uk/mh-mag. Once you're in the squad, you'll also have access to tons of exclusive content, including interviews, ad-free videos, and our world-class training platform, which features dozens of training plans to suit every level and any goal.
Emmanuel, you have a specially designed prosthetic for the start of races. How important do you think it is that, as well as all of these sort of like big pushes in the sort of recognition and visibility of the sport continues, how important do you think the sort of ongoing research and development in prosthetics is?
I think it's important. I mean, not just prosthetics, but I think in all sports equipment, I think it's always important to have that constant research and just like being able to find ways of making things better, making things maybe lighter or faster. And obviously, like in terms of in Paralympics, every disability is different, and even you might find someone else that's also an arm amputee, but maybe they might not necessarily need a prosthetic, or maybe someone runs with, because I know one of the Australian athletes, Jaden Page, who I raced in the Commonwealth Games, and he actually runs with his prosthetics on. So whereas with me, I feel like I don't necessarily need to run with my prosthetic on. So, it's different from person to person, but I think when we can get more of an understanding of what the general consensus actually needs and requires, even like in terms of like with the wheelchairs, because not every wheelchair will be suited to like a particular person. So it's all about just understanding the person and their body and what really works well for them. And of course, it's the research and the development that can really help benefit that.
Yeah, I use a contraption in my boat. I don't wear prosthetics in my kayak. I do in my canoe, but in my kayak, it's sort of a contraption that holds me in really tight. A lot of people think that kayaking, it's all just upper arms. It is not. It's a full body thing, and if you've got legs, you're able to apply power into the boat because the boat's the thing that's moving. You're not. And the other misconception about my sport is that the boat. You put the paddle in the water and you move the boat past the paddle. So the water is concrete. That's how you sort of envisage it. Think of it like sitting on a skateboard. That's how you move the boat. So you're pushing that boat through the water. And if you've got legs, you're able to drive and use your legs as pistons. So it's a big sort of performance detriment to not have your lower limbs and especially core for the more the KL1 paddlers, so the more disabled paddlers. And like the materials, I think, is the biggest thing change in our sport. I didn't experience it, but before carbon fiber, they were using very light wooden boats, and carbon fiber came about, and then we've got this amazing material that we can mold and make pretty much anything like prosthetics, but we can also make paddles and boats and adaptions and all sorts of different things. And it's light, it's strong, it bounces back with a lot of energy. It's somewhat fragile. It depends on what you're doing with it. But yeah, just the ability to see a person, as Emmanuel said, as an individual, and customize it to that person. And it's, I wanted to interject, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. It's how people see themselves as well, and that's sort of like what they require or what they desire to be seen or to be. Like, I wear shorts quite a lot of the time because it helps people understand me very quickly, without me having to talk or tell everyone all the time, and it's just easier as well. So there's a twofold sort of benefit there. But in sport, they're always looking for those 1%, those little changes, or those little performance gains, and materials might be different, methods might be different, and even training methods might be different as well. And that sort of it's a big spectrum. There's many ways to skin a cat in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easy to think of like, it's about those marginal gains, etc. But I think something I was given some thought to recently was actually innovations in prosthetics could actually allow much more people to compete. As you say, depending on the individual, and just having those innovations could actually create more surface area for more athletes to get involved.
Yeah, although. Double-edged sword. So we come from a very developed nation, a very affluent nation. Our sporting organisations provide a lot for us. We don't have to really. Well, I don't know about yourself, but I don't have to pay. Yeah, we don't have to pay for our flights. We don't have to pay for accommodation, entry fees, equipment. It's all provided. But a developing nation, and that's where I think it gets a little bit hazy in terms of. Should we be allowed to spend? Let's say Formula One. They've been put caps on them because the poorer teams, I should say, less affluent teams, they are very rich.
It's a bad sport.
But the top teams, they can spend billions of dollars if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And the poor cousin down there at whatever team, I won't say that, but don't have that opportunity to spend all that money. So it's like our competitors. We, especially the African nations, really have a hard time finding equipment and finding the possibility. And it is, it's something we need to sort of help and provide for. So, if there are hand-me-downs out there, it's almost, you're doing a great thing for our sport, but for people with disability, wherever they're from, to help them get into it as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's led me really nicely into the next thing I wanted to ask was, how do we strike that balance? Do you think something that, because it's tempting to just take the Olympics and say this is obviously something that exists generally. Like there are countries that can pour tons of money into the Olympic programs, and there's countries that aren't. But personally, I think that becomes even more of an issue for para athletes, where it's potentially more important for it not to be an issue. So do you think there's a necessity for maybe some sort of oversight where developments, I don't want to say obviously not developments are halted, but there's a way that it's ensured that there's that trickle down across nations, so that it doesn't become a case of richest nation gets the best, is always getting those marginal gains?
Yeah, and to be honest, I wouldn't know how to police it. We always want to be faster today, but in like double or amputee running blades, they're limited at a set height, right? They can't be too tall because you can go really, really big, and obviously the bigger it is, the more energy it's going to release. You need to build up, so therefore it's capped. So can a bilateral amputee go faster than Usain Bolt? Probably not, but not at the moment, at least. But maybe soon. Who knows? Like there's all these potentials in innovation and development, in order to see what's possible, and we always want to see what's possible. But like you said, how do we bring the other guys with us and not leave them behind? Because there's probably more people with disability living in Africa than Australia, entire population 10 times over. So it's a really difficult balance of making sure that we bring them along. And you can have like regional powers or regional countries that are affluent or developed. Like Australia, we help out in the Pacific nations quite a lot, and trying to hand out our equipment and our clothing and just simple little things, you know, like it might be some sunglasses, you know, very simple. You can get them from the service station for, you know, $5 or whatever. So it's just having that balance to be, you know, not so selfish, I think, is probably greed and you know, because like we pointed out before, there's quite a bit of commercial gain from having a good athlete or a good team, and there's some ethical issues that we need to worry about as well.
Yeah. Do you think the innovations in prosthetics from athletes and from these programs where you're seeking those marginal gains have a knock-on effect to disability at large, like non-athletes?
So I would say to an extent they do, because, you know, like prosthetics itself, they're not cheap at all. You can find yourself spending like upwards of $2,000 to $10,000, some even more, depending on, you know, what you're using it for. So that, I think that's where sort of the barrier comes in terms of like how certain people can access it, especially if they're not necessarily competing at like national or international level. Then it really becomes like a barrier of like, where do they get the funding to actually support, you know, the equipment that they actually need. The more fortunate countries, like the athletes that are coming from like the lower level leagues wouldn't necessarily be able to have access to, you know, those equipment unless, you know, they had like family members or, you know, that were fortunate, or maybe like they were sponsored by someone. So yeah, getting across that barrier is probably the most difficult challenge, you know, in terms of like just being able to fund all this equipment, because, you know, the materials, it's not cheap materials, and it's not necessarily easy to make either. So yeah, it's just being able to find that sort of that balance on what you can actually provide for, like, let's say lower level athletes, for them to actually develop, and then once they develop, then, you know, they get on like I don't know, for example, like a scheme where they actually get like a new set of blades when they reach like a certain level, or maybe run or swim at a specific time, that kind of stuff.
I think it's important to point out that with leg amputations or prosthetics and maybe arm as well, you have a specific prosthetic for that task, that activity. So, for example, blades, that's purely for running. Like, you wouldn't see many people wandering around in the street with blades on. They're very difficult to use because they've got no heel. You just want to fall backwards, and you always sort of got to, you know, bounce on each toe, and they're difficult to walk in. So, you know, having a specific leg that required for a specific activity is quite difficult and obviously expensive, because you get many different sets. But having the development in prosthetics, and unfortunately I'm a beneficiary of it, is conflict, war, and the amount of amputees that came out of, you know, Afghanistan, and that we're going to see out of Ukraine and Russia, and then even Gaza and things like that. There's obviously, we don't want to get into the politics of that, but what's that is creating are going to be many amputees that are going to require many different prosthetics, and, you know, a small portion of them will be in the Paralympic Games.
What words of encouragement do you have for young or you know, any age really, people looking to get into parasport, or maybe who even haven't thought about it before? Do you have any words of encouragement?
Yeah, I'm probably going to steal what Emmanuel wants to say, because he said it before and it's bloody brilliant. It's don't be afraid to fail. I think it's, you know, you got to try, and you got to fail, and then you'll learn and improve and be better. And persistence is a great substitute for talent. So you've got to just give it a go, give it a try, fail, get back up, dust yourself off, and have another crack. So sorry if I stole you.
Yeah, it's got to think of something new now, and that was good as well.
Yeah,
so.
that was a very good answer. I think for me is always to sort of not necessarily limit your options. Try and give yourselves as much option as possible, because, you know, you might try, for example, for me, I tried swimming and I found out that I was quite good at swimming, and then later on I tried athletics, and maybe I found out I was even better at athletics. So, you know, actually being able to just try out loads of different things, and not everything is for you. And likewise with your peers or whoever you're working with, not everything will work for them. So, just being able to actually find your true identity. And it might take some time and it might take a few attempts, a few failures, but eventually you will get there as long as you're determined and as long as you don't necessarily consider what other people think about what you're doing and you're focused on yourself.
Nice. So try different sports.
Of course.
Give yourself a chance.
Not necessarily sports, even if you want to, like different hobbies or anything like that, or maybe, you're really passionate about maths or anything like that, and you just try something new. And sometimes, you find that you actually like the thing that you've tried new and you like it more. So that's one thing that I found out, that's just being able to try different things and get an understanding on what actually is required from that particular area. And you might actually find out that you've got the requirements, but you've never tried it, so you wouldn't know.
So stay curious, stay open.
Stay curious, of course.
Guys, this has been great. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
Cheers, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.